Hello everyone, welcome to my studio. Today we're painting two elegant daffodils. You're going to need a size 10 or 12 round brush, the lid of a spice jar, which you're going to trace around to make a circle, and a nickel, which we're going to use for the size of the interior of our daffodil's trumpet. Using the nickel, I mark the width of the opening of the trumpet of the daffodil and draw a wiggly line to make a wiggly oval shape. This will be the opening of the trumpet. I then draw a stem from the side, middle of the circle all the way down to the bottom of the paper, and then sketch in where I would like the leaves. The body of the trumpet is a triangular or cone form. It looks like a trumpet. And then the spathe, I think that's how you pronounce it, at the top of the neck, that little papery bit that daffodils have, is just a little bit thinner or a little bit thicker than the neck and has an opening kind of like the mouth of Pac-Man or maybe a fish eating the trumpet. And then for the petals, they kind of look like bunny ears. A couple of bunny ears on the top and then a couple of bunny ears on the bottom. And the petal that intersects the trumpet is kind of like a skinny oval. So 2 bunny ears on the top, 2 bunny ears on the bottom, and a skinny oval right in the middle. Then I lighten it with my kneaded eraser, and I start putting color into the daffodil with a cadmium deep yellow. I start by painting the body of the trumpet and the opening of the trumpet with that cadmium deep yellow wash. It's about 5 brushfuls of water and then 1 brushful of the deep yellow mixed together. I fill in the whole body of the trumpet and the opening, as well as that little oval, the petal that intersects it in the middle, and then 1 petal on the top, not both of them, just one of them, and 1 on the bottom, and they're all done in the same cadmium deep yellow wash. While everything is still wet, I dip my brush into the cadmium orange and I'm charging the tips of the petals and the area right in front of the petal that intersects the trumpet, as well as the opening, that curvy line, the opening of the trumpet. While it's still wet, I'm manipulating it a little bit, moving it around, as well as soaking it back up from the petal itself so that the petal itself will remain light. And then I go back into that orange and add just a little bit more to the very tips of that delicate wavy edge of the opening of the trumpet. This allows it to have that really pretty soft wet on wet look. I bring that orange down just a little bit more. And then I go in with a little bit of that cadmium red light and go over where I just put the orange, and it's blending in nicely with that orange. I use my brush as a sponge by drying it off and then soaking back up some of that red color So it has a bit of a lighter area right on the inside of that opening of the trumpet. And then while that red squiggly line is still wet, I bring it down using straight lines towards the bottom of that trumpet shape to give it that beautiful petal texture or trumpet texture. The next step is to go back into that cadmium deep yellow wash and paint in the next two petals. The first two are already dry enough so that the next two layer on and you can see that really pretty transparent effect where you can see the petal underneath it. While the petals are still wet, I'm charging the tips of them with orange as well as the lines on the top and then the bottom of that petal that intersects the body of the trumpet. And then I almost forgot about that last petal, but I'm going ahead and painting that in also with the cadmium deep yellow wash. It just looks like a little hill. It's just a little curved line to suggest the petal. And now I'm painting in the spathe. I hope that's how you pronounce it, as S-P-A-T-H-E. It's like a little papery part of the daffodil. And I'm using a raw sienna for that. For the stem of the daffodil, I'm using a combination of emerald green and burnt sienna, but you can use whatever green you want. And I use my pinky as like a little kickstand to stabilize my hand and draw a straight line down to the bottom of the paper. The daffodil also has a little bit of a darker part right before it hits the papery part of the neck, so that's what I'm putting in there. Adding a little bit of green into that raw sienna for a little shadow. And then bringing it down the stem. I soak some of it back up by wiping off my brush, drying off my brush a bit, and then add in some ultramarine blue up by the top of the neck of the flower and then at the base of the stem as well. Just for a little added interest, a little shadow. I'm then using the wash of the cadmium orange, and because the flower is dry now, I'm able to add a layer or a glaze to add shadow and texture to that trumpet of the flower by putting in some straight lines going back towards the base of the flower, and then also into that line that separates that petal that cuts that trumpet shape in half, so it looks like there's a bit of shadow there. I'm then using some of the raw sienna and tapping that into the shadow as well. I then use that same wash of emerald green and burnt sienna to make my first leaf. The more you press down on your brush, the thicker the line will be. My first time with the leaf, I didn't think it was quite dark enough, so I went ahead and went over it one more time. Then for the second leaf, I'm going to be doing it the same way, where I start off with less pressure on it, and then there's more pressure towards the middle, and then kind of like an airplane taking off, you want to pick up that pressure as you get towards the tip of the leaf. You can see how the tips of the leaves are darker as the paint has pooled at the top. If you don't like that look, you can pull the paint back towards the bottom, or you can dry your brush off on the paper towel and using it as a sponge, you can soak that back up. But I actually really liked that look, and so I'm keeping it to dry as it is. So we're all done with this beautiful daffodil, and we are ready for daffodil number 2. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name of the watercolor sketchbook, so I have it posted up here, but I really like it. It is a 140-pound cold pressed 100% cotton paper, and it is 5 inches or 7 inches by 5.5 inches. I think it's just the right size for these little tutorials. So for the second daffodil, I'm starting with that same wash of cadmium deep yellow, and I'm making the shape of a trumpet or a cone with a little ruffly opening for the opening of the daffodil, and filling that in with the cadmium deep yellow wash. The next step is to paint in the first petal, which is about halfway down the trumpet from the opening to the end, and it's kind of like giving a little ballerina tutu to the trumpet. The shape of it is just like a wiggly oval. For the neck or the spathe, that little papery brown part of the daffodil, I'm using a raw sienna, which is blending nicely wet into the yellow. I am soaking a bit of it back up by drying off my brush and using it like a sponge so that it doesn't go into the petal, and I lightened it up a little bit as well. And then I am using a combination of emerald green and burnt sienna for the stem. I used my pinky as kind of like a kickstand to stabilize my hand to try to have as straight of a line as possible, although with this paper being in a sketchbook, not being taped down, it is a little more wobbly than usual, but that's okay. We're just having fun with this watercolor. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm adding in a little bit of the ultramarine blue to the base of the stem and right below the spathe or the bottom of the neck. Then I'm adding a little bit more of that raw sienna to the neck, that papery part of that daffodil. It's kind of a golden brown color. And then going in and adding in a bit of shadow using the ultramarine blue. Next up, I'm adding in the first petal, and for these two petals up at the top, they kind of look like bunny ears, as if we're putting bunny ears on that center petal of our daffodil. So we'll put 2 bunny ears up top, and then at the bottom or the underside of the flower, we're going to put 2 bunny ears on the underside of the flower as well. And for this, I'm using that same cadmium yellow deep wash. It's about 5 brushfuls of water and 1 of the paint. And then I'm charging it with that cadmium orange, just at the little tips, just dabbing it in, tapping it into the tips of the water of the petals, and then also the inside on either side of that trumpet, not going into that center petal that intersects the middle of the trumpet, just into the wet petals, the 2 on the top and the 2 on the bottom. And then with that same orange, I put the line that separates that middle petal from the front part of that trumpet, and then putting in some lines for shadow and definition and texture for the trumpet, and those are just straight lines, and then putting in that wavy line that indicates the opening of the trumpet, and then adding some more of those lines in for the shadow and the texture of the trumpet. For the leaves, I'm using a mixture of the emerald green and the raw sienna, the same as with the stem. It's that watered down mixture of them, the wash. And starting from the bottom, I first put light pressure, and then towards the middle, You can see how the leaves get wider. That's the heavier pressure. And then at the end, it's kind of like a plane lifting off the ground where you put less and less pressure on it until it lifts off the paper. That gives it that thinner, pointy top. While the leaf is still wet, I'm moving the paint around a bit just so that it is a little bit wider than I had it originally. Our elegant daffodil is now complete. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.